Bob, back on the alternate day, geopolitical news. Here's a little bit on what's happening in the world. Jaishankar is hitting the United States. There's a little bit of a joke. I was doing the rounds which said that, hey, Jaishankar is on the way to the US to meet with the Secretary of State, Bilkin, but Bilkin is currently having all photo ops in the Middle East, in Palestine, right? However, I think we may have jumped the gun, and this joke that maybe we're going to do a Zoom call after this 12-hour trip, right? However, I think that the dates are a little mixed up because he's in the United States now, Bilkin is in the Middle East now, and both are supposed to meet only on Friday. There's enough time between now and Friday for Bilkin to get back, and in most likelihood, he will, right? Now look, what I would have thought though, is an opportunity lost. But if you remember, somewhere Sumit Ganguly had mentioned, is India grown up to be ready to take on this mantle of trying to be some kind of a go-between between Gaza, between the Palestine and Israel, because they trust the war. You know what could have happened? A great photo op for our foreign policy is if Jaishankar actually had stopped over in Israel, met with the relevant people, in fact said a hello to Bilkin in the Middle East, in Israel or in the Palestine, and then hoofed on to the United States. Opportunity lost, I personally think opportunity lost. Here, about the Middle East, right? The cynicism at the heart of the 11-day Israel-Hamas conflict is written by Mahesh Sachdeva, really nicely written. The humanitarian tragedy in Gaza has embarrassed some moderate Arab regimes, particularly those which had recently signed the Abraham Accords. Through their respective overtures towards Israel were based on the pursuance of their individual national interests and are unlikely to be reversed. Okay, to rationalize the ceasefire, a new wheel of cynical calculus has to be spun. On its part, Hamas is certain to claim having won the war by merely surviving it. Absolutely right. I had mentioned this earlier. Having defanged Hamas and PIJ, their martyrdom status is not in Israel's interest. Absolutely not. It would only lead to the preponderance of the hardliners Ramla, either within Al-Fatah or through a Hamas takeover. And so just as cynical calculations led to the conflict, a cynical synergy in objectives has led to its end for now. Okay, and this is the other important part we should know. America to reopen Jerusalem consulate backs two-state plan. US stance restores ties with Palestinians that had been downgraded during the Trump era, and I think this is really important. Right? Unfortunately for Bilkin and the world, basically what the situation is that there is absolutely instability in politics in Israel because Netanyahu seems to be on his way out, and Abbas also seems to be of no value on this side. And the other big play that's happening while we all watch, which is where millions of people died and refugees were created for Europe, is Syria. Everybody's kind of backed out. Whoosh! Now that the United States is out, nobody knows who to fight with, right? Russia doesn't know who to fight with who, Iran doesn't know who to target, and here you have Assad set to secure win as Syria votes today. What a cynical waste, I would say, and this probably war can be put on the, I guess, on the doorsteps of Hillary Clinton for what she did, right? The other thing we look at, it is really funny that I want you to get it. I told you about how China is reclaiming the mountain Everest on the peak at half, right? What happens? They've gone after the Pamir mountain range in Tajikistan, like I told you. So what if they decide to take the Himalayas and just decide to come down the Himalayas on the other side and tell Nepal, hey, that's where Nepal starts? And probably might happen because Nepal is now fully kind of entwined with China, and it's finding very difficult to walk out of its grip, right? I suspect that's got something to do with Bhandari suddenly having jumped in and saying that elections, right? But anyway, who knows? Nepal gets consulate in China's Chengdu. The Himalayan country, sandwiched between India and China, is the only one to have a consulate general in Lhasa, and that's important. I think America needs to, in my opinion, be bought into Nepal in a full flow, because I don't think Nepal can really, just like the United States, Pakistan really can't do only with China and needs Saudi Arabia and the United States. Same thing with Nepal, folks. Then, besieged by COVID-19, India seeks to restore global image. Jaishankar meets UN chief in New York. Diplomats insist minister agenda beyond pandemic vaccine. I think this is a large play of heart. I understand we are everybody who's a naysayer about India, right, is kind of saying that we've lost the plot. But maybe this is a retro thing, right? Maybe our weakness makes it easier, because what has shown us in this pandemic and the subsequent deluge of help from every quarter, the Quad, the United States, Japan, European Union, that how critical the world thinks India is, and that is something for all the naysayers to absorb, right? Absorb. Right? And then this is another one that I think, despite mutual interest, no talks with Iran. This was long time back, right, about Iran. I think the United States is making a play for both Russia, because there's a meeting scheduled between Biden and Putin, I think, in Switzerland. And similarly, Iran, I think the sanctions are about to be removed. And I think obviously there is going to be a whole bunch of repercussions in the Middle East, driven essentially by Israel, because now Saudi, as you remember, is building bridges with Iran, and a lot of things are happening in play. Folks, welcome back. One thing we need to worry about, the United States and Pakistan, and as it kind of withdraws from Afghanistan, the Pakistan will find itself more out of the limb. So here we go. US security assistance to Pakistan remains suspended, says Pentagon. Now this is a very interesting report by Anuj Gupta, Afghanistan 2.0. As US withdraws troops from Afghanistan, developments in the country will raise security concerns beyond South Asia. That's for sure is true. But see what's happened in Syria. You don't hear about Syria anymore, and now, like I said, Bashar Assad is going to get re-elected. Why it just seems is that once US pulls up, and US seems to be a soft target for everybody. Every time the US goes in, Russia wants to jump in, and China helps, and the jihadis jumped in. The same thing, I suspect, is going to happen in Afghanistan. As the US withdraws, and it's not in focus and a target, all of a sudden the jihadis will be fighting each other, that's for sure, or they'll be targeting China and back again to Russia, believe me. So what she says is something you should hear here. She says, however, current geopolitical compulsions, including the US-China competition, the China-Pakistan embrace, the China-Russia strategic partnership, and the China-Iran deal, have made Afghanistan strategically important. This, despite the withdrawal, the looming shadow of US-NATO will remain, with a focus on preventing Afghanistan from becoming a safe haven. US-NATO have chosen Afghan forces under a democratic government as their local allies and have assured funding up to 2024. But a few points are clear. Afghanistan is part of the US-led coalition against ISIS, and hence, committed as a nation, the Afghan government can take a sovereign decision to ask for training or operational support. The US has a sufficient resources in the Central Command Theater on land, sea and air to provide immediate support on request. It has the option of drone strikes in Afghanistan and beyond. The Central Command is already considering active air surveillance missions, high-end technological and signature reductions. So this is the important part. The US and NATO, technologically always there. It's not going to allow that easy for the Taliban, and more importantly, Pakistan just may have lost a bargaining chip. Good for India, folks. So look at this, guys. When you look at China, right here, the periphery for which what it's trying to control is something where the United States has to pay a lot of attention, which is the Central Asia region, which is essentially, you take this Kazakhstan, you go down, you take Turkmenistan, you take Afghanistan, and you go around like this, Tajikistan and this area, right? So I'm back. So as the United States pulls its resources out of Afghanistan, pulls out of the Middle East, and reduces its financial and defense burden there, and it moves to South China Sea, which is really critical. The other part that it really, really needs to play a huge role is the Central Asian nations. And as there's a note as I write, this is Foreign Policy by Philip Curoso, which says COVID-19 heats up the news great game in Central Asia. It says, right, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, Central Asian nations, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are facing a particularly challenging test of their governments, healthcare systems and fledgling economies, which are heavily dependent on commodity exports to global economic engines such as China. Okay. Unlike many other developing countries left isolated by the pandemic, they have a choice of great power backers as China, Russia, and the United States compete to offer aid. Important, right? As laid out in its strategy, the United States' first policy objective is to help Central Asian states maintain sovereignty and resist domination by the other great powers. Great power competition is, in part, a competition for strategic influence over precious resources, but also is critical to build pressure on China's periphery, of which it is absolutely shit scared. To compete with Russia and China globally, the United States must force them to commit more attention and resources in Central Asia, a region long under Russian political dominion, yet increasingly economically dependent on China. In addition, any bandwidth China and Russia invest there is effectively diverted from other strategically significant regions such as South China Sea, the Arctic, the Indian Ocean, and Italy, alarmingly a recent addition to China's BRI. COVID-19 has accelerated a need for resources that in turn offers an opportunity for the US to engage. It must open a new front away from traditional friction points to frustrate the ambitions of China and Russia, which now openly cooperate to impede US foreign policy goals in the world. And guess who is in the best position culturally to be an able ally of the United States? You guessed it right, India. Be brave and be there. Central Asia is more than just one such front. Strategically, the region matters. Okay. Critics of US engagement in Central Asia might prefer to let China and Russia compete alone at no cost to the United States, but to the extent that was ever possible with Russia power in decline, COVID-19 has changed the dynamic. Russia's ability to exert influence in Central Asia grows weaker as its overwhelmed and underprepared healthcare system is under siege at home, and its government coffers are underfilled and amid low oil prices. Now, this is the important other play for us. Facing little competition in Central Asia from either Russia or the United States, thus far China has seized the initiative in wake of COVID-19. But the point is, this region is suspicious of China and fearful of China. They don't like Russia. Obviously, they broke away from the Russians, right? Except for maybe the strongmen there. They need Russia and China to stay in power. But by and large, most of the population in the public has to have a problem with what's happening in the Uyghurs and in China. And that needs to be played up. And watch this little snippet from with Nikki Haley to tell you why it is important the United States uses this, and so does India. India, of course, is on a back foot because we are mistreating our minorities too. But hey, we're still better off than what China is doing. Jai Hind.
President Trump was right to call them out on that. It's only as good as if we follow up on it. The human rights abuses, this isn't just another human rights abuse. This is very telling. Here you have 1 million Muslim Uyghurs in concentration camps, making them change their name, change their religion, forcing them to drink, which is against their religion, sexual abuse, physical abuse. We said that we would never again turn our eyes away from genocide. What is happening there now, it's the reason why I think we should boycott the Olympics. When China did the last Olympics, it was very much known that China saw it as their coming out party. When this Beijing Olympics happens, they are planning that this is going to be them showing the world that they are the new superpower of the world. And you mark my words, after that Olympics, if everything goes smooth, they're going to take Taiwan. And when they take Taiwan, it's over. It's over.